The invention of the city. The city was first invented in the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East. In this fertile strip of land reaching all the way from Israel to Turkey to Iraq, the first villages formed, which grew into proto-cities and finally in the first true city named Uruk, belonging to the first civilization of the world, the Sumerian civilization. The key technology that made this happen was the mass-produced mud brick, which the Sumerians used to create massive building projects. I think this lecture can best be called In Praise of Bricks, were it not that it takes some time to explain why bricks are worth studying. I think what works best here is to let the Mesopotamians themselves explain how proud they were of their achievements, as we can read in their cuneiform writings. We read that they believed in the god Enki, who was the builder of civilization, who came from heaven to create order in the world by introducing the brick mold and by building the first brick houses. The Sumerian obsession with clay was so great that Enki was even believed to have fashioned mankind itself out of clay. And in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the first great epic from world history, we read that the walls and temples of Uruk were the greatest pride of King Gilgamesh. So we've got quite a magical adventure to go on. Let's start. Hey, good to see you. This is Stephan, author of In Search of the Sublime. On this World History channel, we'll trace humanity's relentless pursuit of scientific truth, moral excellence, and enlightenment. We'll meet anyone from Mesopotamian astronomers and Indian yogis to Greek philosophers and Enlightenment scientists. And you'll meet them firsthand using primary sources, giving you valuable insights that transcend the surface-level understanding you get on other channels. Go check it out for yourself. Let's start. The earliest farming villages appeared at the end of the last ice age in an area known as the Fertile Crescent. True to its name, this area is filled with wild plants and game, providing enough resources for hunter-gatherers to settle down. And here we see this Fertile Crescent curving around the Arabian desert. In the bottom left here we see Jericho, an old town in Israel. Above it we see Abu Huraira in Syria. We see Catalhoyuk in Turkey. And all the way to the right we see Mesopotamia, where the first true cities formed. Here, as you can see, the Euphrates River and the Tigris River come together, forming a very green, fertile patch of land. Abu Huraira, located in modern-day Syria, is the oldest known town, which likely had only a couple of hundred inhabitants. It dates to about 11,000 BC, so not long after the last ice age. 1,000 years later, in 10,000 BC, its inhabitants shifted to agriculture, making them the earliest farmers in the world. And then we have Jericho in modern-day Israel. This town is much more advanced. In fact, it is often called a proto-city. It was first inhabited around 9,000 BC by hunter-gatherers. And around 8,000 BC, the town reached a population of perhaps 3,000 inhabitants. And about 7,000 BC, we find the first evidence of domesticated crops, sheep and goats. Impressive for its time, Jericho was protected by a 3.6 meter high stone wall and also an 8.5 meter high circular tower, also made of stone. And for those uncomfortable with meters, that is equal to about a 3-story building. Starting around 7,000 BC, we also find mud bricks in Jericho. These bricks are made of a mixture of sand, clay and water and a bit of straw. This mixture is then put in a mold to gain its shape, and then it has to harden in the sun. As a result, these bricks are also often called sun-dried bricks. A wonderful depiction of brickmaking was found in the much later tomb of Rekhmire from Egypt from the 15th century BC. On the left here we see water being taken from a source to be mixed with clay. Here we see that mixture poured into molds. Here we see the bricks left to dry in the sun, and here they are carried. An astonishingly insightful picture of this ancient form of technology. And above it, by the way, we see depicted the smelting and casting of bronze. But that, of course, is a topic for another time. Another important early farming village is Uruk in today's Turkey, which flourished around 7000 BC and had an estimated population of 6,000 people. This village consisted of square-shaped houses stacked next to each other in all directions. There were no streets and villagers had to leave their houses through their ceilings using ladders. Some of the larger rooms in this village had more extensive decorations. It is possible that these could be public meeting places or even shrines, but this is just guesswork. As we've seen, these proto-cities already had significant populations, but they were still smaller than the first true cities. These proto-cities also lacked clear evidence of strong, centralized administrations, which is often indirectly indicated by, for instance, large public works, including large temples, palaces, granaries, and so on. So now we move to the first true cities that appear in Mesopotamia, in that southeastern tip of the Fertile Crescent. Crucially, the Mesopotamians were also the first to develop a script, allowing them to write about their early cities. In cuneiform, we read that the Mesopotamians themselves traced the invention of the city and also of kingship to a place named Eridu, which in reality was more like a large village instead of a city, with perhaps a population of 5,000 people. One document in which Eridu is featured prominently is the so-called Sumerian king list from about 2100 BC. It is written on a stunning cuboid-shaped bluff clay. It is very beautiful. It lists the names of both mythological and historical kings, combined with the cities they governed and the duration of their rule. Each of those mythological kings is claimed to have ruled for thousands of years, and the kings are also organized into those who lived before and after the flood. But the flood myth will be a topic for another time. The proto-city Eridu is mentioned in the first line of the text. It reads, "After kingship had descended from heaven, Eridu became the first seat of kingship." That is, it became the first city-state ruled by a king. The legendary status of Eridu as the first city was later taken over by the Babylonians, who came to power in Mesopotamia in the 19th century BC. In their creation myth, the Enuma Elish, we find a description of the creation of the first city by Marduk, the Babylonian king of the gods. We read, "A holy house, a house of the gods in a holy place, had not been made. Reed had not come forth. A tree had not been created. A brick had not been laid. A brick mold had not been made. A house had not been made. A city had not been built. And a living creature had not been placed therein. All the lands were sea. But then Eridu was made, the holy city, the dwelling of their heart's delight," they called it solemnly. So what do we know about that proto-city Eridu? What made it so important to the Sumerians? Eridu was located in the marshlands of southern Mesopotamia and had easy access to a large body of fresh groundwater, which the Sumerians referred to as the Abzu. With almost no rainfall in the area, the Abzu was the vital source of water for the community and was therefore seen as sacred. The Abzu was so important that it even got a prominent place in the Sumerian cosmology. The Sumerians saw the earth as a flat disk surrounded by a saltwater ocean. The freshwater Abzu was located beneath the earth, and below the Abzu was the underworld. The sky was imagined as a vault that held back another body of water above it that would occasionally fall in the form of rain. The earliest cuneiform tablets from Eridu are from the 3rd millennium BC, and they already mention the god Enki, who they consider to be the legendary founder of Eridu, and also the god of wisdom, crafts, magic, and fertility. He was believed to live in the depths of the Abzu, all the way at the bottom of that reservoir of fresh groundwater underneath the earth. The god Enki was also called Nudimut, or the one who creates, as he was believed to have used his craftsmanship and intellect to create human beings from the life-giving clay of the Abzu. In some stories he does this alone, and in other cases he is assisted by various goddesses to make this creation happen. Enki was also believed to have built the temple of Eridu, called the Abzu, or the House of Abzu. In the inner shrine of this temple, Enki was believed to be literally present in the form of a statue. These god statues were treated as though they were real gods. In later cases, in other temples in Mesopotamia for instance, we know that these god statues were not just worshipped, but they were fed meals, they were clothed in expensive garments woven with gems, they were entertained with music, and so on. A god statue might even have his wife goddess statue in a separate room, complete with a marriage bed. And sometimes there was even a vizier god and servants gods. Very curious from a modern perspective. Only high priests and priestesses were allowed to enter these temples. And they had to make sure that everything went according to plan, so as not to upset the gods. We have found the location of this temple of Eridu, although it is in ruins today. Excavations at the site reveal a long history of shrine building. The first shrine was a little mud brick room of perhaps 3 square meters in area, and it is dated to about 5000 BC. So very old indeed. When this temple started to deteriorate, which happens relatively quickly building in sun-dried bricks, they filled the temple up with sand and then built the next temple straight on top of it. This was repeated 19 times, with each temple being slightly bigger and more intricate than its predecessor. And here we see that first small temple. And here we see a much larger temple built 1000 years after. On top of these series of temples, we have found the remains of a stepped pyramid known as a ziggurat, built in the 21st century BC by King Ur-Nammu and Amarsin. We know these kings must have been the builders of the ziggurat because their names are inscribed in some of the bricks we found in the area. And here we see a diagram of those temples from the simplest temple on the right all the way through that huge ziggurat at the end. And this progression took about 3000 years, from 5000 to 2000 BC. Somewhere in the middle of this time period, in the 4th millennium BC, the much more durable oven-baked bricks were developed. Heating bricks in the oven makes them much stronger than just letting them dry in the sun. This was combined with the invention of bitumen mortar, made from petroleum, which allowed brick walls to become waterproof. The much cheaper sun-dried bricks remained in use in most cases, except for in the most important buildings, such as a ziggurat. And even here, only the outer layer of the ziggurat was made from those burnt fire oven-baked bricks, while the bricks inside were the same old sun-dried bricks. But this outer layer allowed these buildings to withstand the elements much better. Now back to Enki. Besides creating that first temple of Eridu, Enki was also believed to have brought civilization to Earth, in some cases with the help of mysterious figures known as the Apkallu, 7 half-human, half-fish sages who served Enki in the depths of the Abzu. Interestingly, we found various myths on clay tablets telling us how Enki brought civilization to Earth. The great historian and translator Samuel Noah Kramer was correct when he stated that these myths about Enki are of, quote, profound significance to the study of the history and progress of civilization, since they tell us what the Mesopotamians themselves deemed essential elements of civilization. In these myths, we read that Enki was seen as the guardian of curious objects known as Mi, These meats, although clearly described as physical objects that could be lifted, carried and stored, were actually more like concepts or inventions essential to civilization. They appear, for instance, in the story Enki and the World Order, where we find Enki establishing order on Earth. Although the text is fragmented, we can make out that Enki creates various essential elements of civilizations and then puts gods in charge of them. We read, for instance, that he filled the Tigris and the Euphrates with water and fish, and then put the god Enbilulu in charge. And then he does the same for the plow and the yoke. Then he created the pickaxe and the brick mold, that's important for our story, and then he puts the brick god Kula in charge of them. Then Enki lays foundations and builds various houses and places them under the charge of the god Mushdama or Mushdam, the great builder of Enlil, the father of the gods. Finally, we read, he fills the world with plants, animals, stables and sheep pens. In the story Inana and Enki, we read that the goddess Inana came to Enki's temple in Eridu and got him drunk in order to steal those meats and take them to her own city, Uruk, in order to make Uruk the center of civilization. We read, the arts of woodworking, metalworking, writing, toolmaking, leatherworking, masonry, basket weaving. Pure Inanna took them. And here we see how strange that concept of me is. Woodworking, for instance, was considered to be a me that a god could pick up and take to another city, even though it is more like a concept or a skill. Very interesting. Important for us here is of course masonry, which includes bricklaying. The text continues, to the pure Inanna, my daughter, I, Enki, shall present lordship, godship, the tiara, the throne of kingship. Pure Inanna took them. To the pure Inanna, my daughter, I shall present the scepter, the staff, the shrine, shepherdship, kingship. These are all different me's. Pure Inanna took them. Among the me's we also find numerous priestly offices, the concept of truth, descent into the underworld and ascent from it, the flood, sexual intercourse and prostitution, the legal tongue and the libelous tongue, art, music, eldership, heroship and power, enmity, straightforwardness, the destruction of cities, lamentation, rejoicing of the heart, falsehood, goodness, justice, wisdom, understanding, purification, fear and outcry, the kindling flame and the consuming flame, wariness, the shout of victory, counsel, the troubled heart, judgment, decision, exuberance, and also musical instruments. These were all considered by the Mesopotamians as the essential element of an ordered society, of a civilization. Inanna then loads all these me's in her boat of heaven and then goes to Uruk. When Enki discovered what had happened, he dispatched a group of sea monsters to stop her, yet they fail and Inanna arrives in Uruk, safe and sound. It is plausible that this story was designed to explain the transfer of power from Eridu to Uruk, which was happening at the time. And in fact, Uruk became the first true city in world history. By 3500 BC, Uruk had grown far beyond any previous settlement, with at its peak an estimated population of 40,000 inhabitants. To protect against invaders, the city was surrounded by a 9-kilometer long city wall, of course made by bricks, was 7 meters tall and complete with gates and towers. These walls were a source of great technological pride for the Sumerians. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, for instance, King Gilgamesh of Uruk is praised for building the city walls and 2 of its temples. The text is filled with pride for the tremendous architectural achievements of the city. Let's read for ourselves. In Uruk, Gilgamesh built walls, a great rampart, and the temple of the blessed Inanna, for the god of the firmament, Anu, and for Ishtar, the goddess of love. Ishtar is the same as Inanna. The text continues, look at it still today. And this is such a powerful quote. The outer wall where the cornice runs. It shines with the brilliance of copper. And the inner wall, it has no equal. Touch the threshold, it is ancient. Approach the temple, the dwelling of Ishtar, Our Lady of Love and War, the like of which no latter-day king, no man alive can equal. Climb yourself upon the walls of Uruk, walk along it, I say. Regard the foundation terrace, examine the masonry. Is it not burnt brick and good? Referring here to those oven-baked, very strong bricks. We continue, the 7 sages, those Apkallu half-fish people, laid its foundations. The text here mentions 2 major temples of Uruk. The temple dedicated to Anu, the god of heaven, was called the White Temple and was placed on top of Uruk's ziggurat, of which only the ruins remain today. It is said that it could be seen from a great distance as it was covered with white plaster, which strongly reflects sunlight. The other temple, the Inana or House of Heaven, was dedicated to the patron goddess of the city, Inana. And here we see a small part of the temple that has withstood the test of time. To finish up, the most important ziggurat of Mesopotamia was built in the city Ur during the reign of King Ur-Nammu in the 21st century BC. The first level of the ziggurat still stands to this day. But in its original state, the structure was stepped and is estimated to have had a height of around 30 meters. And thus ends my ode in praise of bricks and the first cities in world history. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe. And if you want to read more about this topics or many other topics from world history, please read my book In Search of the Sublime. You can get it on Amazon or you can read it for free on worldhistorybook.com. See you next time.